Hello to everybody in the room. And because in previous attempts at town halls, the folks on the computer, and I guess we've got a really good turnout, 70 some locations. 100 some, that's great. So we got a really good turnout. But the folks on the computer zooming in have complained about the sound. So I'm standing on a piece of tape right here, and I've got a microphone right here that hopefully is being nice and clear. So if the folks on Zoom are still having problems, let us know via the chat room, but hopefully we've got the technological issues worked out. What I'm going to do is a few opening comments and share a little bit of info with folks, and then I'm going to turn it over to John and Nikolai, each of whom will be doing presentations about the surveys we've had recently with some of our staff surveys. And then after that, we've carved out at least 15 minutes for some Q&A. So if you do have questions, I mean, those of you here in the room, obviously you'll wave your hand, but those of you on the computer, just for the sake of time, it would be great if you would put those into the chat room, and someone here in this lovely table of 4 people will read them to me. Meanwhile, let me go ahead and kick off, or somebody over there, Pam will read them to me, great. So just want to let you know, we've had a busy few weeks. I have to say, mid-September to mid-November every single year is just utter insanity for me, because I feel like everybody we interact with has their summit, their conference, their meetings, their annual, whatever. I can't move very much. Okay, so I have to really stay on this tape and not move at all. Okay. This is not my normal style. I like walking around and dancing a little bit. So anyway, we've just been craziness, myself, Wendy, to all of us, and I'm sure many of you. Academia evidently likes September to November for a lot of meetings. So hopefully we're ending that season and getting ready to go into a little downtime, maybe catch up on our sleep. But nevertheless, we're still busy. Just this past week, we had the second of the tours we've been organizing for our UC Regents. We took them up to Sonoma County, and a big thanks to Sonoma, Marin, and Napa County Cooperative Extension offices for organizing that. They all worked really closely together. We got to see some fantastic stuff. In fact, in my next slide, I'll show you a tweet that one of the Regents put out. This is something we're doing because when we made a presentation to the Regents a few months ago, one of the things they asked for was a chance to get out and see what we're up to. So thanks to Ann Magaro and the communications team and the local offices, we're really working hard to do that. Our first tour was down in Fresno a couple months ago. We're in the midst of organizing one sometime, I think February-ish, for, give or take, for South Coast Rec, probably down in Orange County. But we'll be organizing other ones around the state as we can, and hopefully eventually getting all of our Regents out on a tour somewhere this next year. And when we do take Regents out, we're also involving some of the key UC leadership and staff that need to know more about us. And actually, if it works, we're inviting legislative staffers or state legislators too, occasionally some local government, just whatever we've got room for and what works out. But it's a really exciting way to get the word out. You put me on the next slide there? Yeah, okay. So those of you on your computer should have that. I just want to spend a moment on a little bit of good news, I think. I mean, we need that occasionally. We've been having some really busy times, some rough times, budget issues, programs, just everything going on. But some really fantastic stuff has been going on. I mentioned that tweet that we had from the Regent, which is on the far left looking at this. She had a great time. And what happens is when they come back to the Regents meeting, they talk to their colleagues. So this is really critical. At the Fresno tour, Senator Ana Caballero also tweeted and actually retweeted some of the Regents down there, which is another one I included there. And for those of you that aren't on social media, please get on there. Pam Con-Rice needs all the help she can get. And I don't know how she does it, because it looks to me like she's on Twitter 24/7. Because I'm always seeing tweets going out. But all of you could be putting these tweets up. We will resend them, resend hers, resend theirs. When a senator or your local people start tweeting, resend it, get it out to the system. A couple financial things. We've had some really exciting new partnerships springing up, particularly with our state government agencies. And some of this came about because of the co-funded positions we've been doing this last year. You know, for example, when Karen Ross, the secretary of our California Department of Food and Ag, learned that we had somehow managed to do a contract with USDA's NRCS, and for those of you that have anything to do with contracting, you know how hard it is for a university to contract with a federal government agency, particularly in something that's a little bit new, which this was for us. We got that contract, it worked well. She learned about it and approached us and was able to bring to us $1.1 million that came out of the Strategic Growth Council to fund 10 brand new community educators around the state. So those folks are scattered around the state now, helping our farmers and ranchers access the climate smart ag programs at CDFA. It's a great partnership between us and CDFA, and they're so happy about it. They're now talking to us about expanding it into some other areas. Wendy's in some conversations right now about them with food safety. And I just got pulled into a meeting with the brand new director of the Department of Pesticide Regulation at Cal EPA last week, who wants to talk about doing something similar with us, partnering on positions with us around IPM. He wants to really start sinking some serious money into our IPM programs and helping those grow. And we're hearing around the state more and more interest in that. So I think it's a really exciting development. Some of you aren't aware that we kicked off late last year a brand new program. It's not a program, but it's a deliverable within the California Naturalist Program on climate stewards. A new opportunity for some of our volunteers to really focus on educating the public about climate change, climate smart ag, and other issues related to that. A lot of what helped us kick that program off was a $500,000 gift from a donor. It was one of the first times we've had a private individual say, hey, I love what you're doing so much, I would like to help you kick off this new program. So $500,000. And we've got some other folks we're talking with now about maybe not that big a gift, but we got some getting close to it. And we do have one more endowment that we will be announcing. And I don't see Lorna here. I think she's out today. I'm not allowed to give details because the donor who has put up $500,000, and we've had it matched from President Napolitano's office. So we're going to be announcing a brand new endowment sometime soon, but they're actually talking to other donors right now because they'd like to bring in some more money before the announcement so that we can make it an even bigger announcement. So we said, sure, we'll wait a few weeks, no problem. So I'm looking forward to being able to make that announcement. And then last but not least, just an example of how our colleagues within the UC system are starting to better understand some of our needs. As many of you know, when I first got here, one of my big frustrations, and I know for a lot of you that have to deal with this, not just here, but out in the field, we were looking at 40 or 50 years of deferred maintenance on all of our facilities. And when we started adding up what just the deferred maintenance was, we were looking at about $45 million. And it's been a real challenge to figure out how to deal with that, because I, for one, am not going to just kick the can down the road again. We've got to deal with it. The good news is the UC system, we were able to make a good, strong case, and kudos to Tutran, Jennifer Bungie, and all the other folks that worked with them on this. We just got obligated $19 million to help us with a big chunk of that deferred maintenance. And that's huge. We've typically not gotten more than maybe $700,000 a year for deferred maintenance from the UC system itself. So 19 million is huge. We're currently written up in the GO bond, the government obligation bond that is going on the ballot next year for potentially another 25 million, assuming that bond goes forward. So big help, it's going to help us really get ahead. If you go to the next slide, another piece about what I think is really exciting news, last week, or actually week before, was the State Economic Summit. We had several folks from ANR and Cooperative Extension down there working on a host of issues around ecosystem services and groundwater recharge and forest resiliency and several other issues. But one of the things we did was a partnership between UC ANR and the Community Colleges Center for Excellence, we released this report on working landscapes. And I want you to really take a second to look at that slide. And I also hope all of you will go and check out the full report at the website there. Because one of the things that drove this, and I think has affected us and our ability to get funding and support that we need, is too many people in this state, most of our urban public, as well as a lot of sectors in finance and economic development and just elected officials, they completely take for granted where their food comes from. I think we all know that. We got plenty of studies showing it. And when they completely take for granted where their food comes from, they also take for granted the important infrastructure that helps make that food safe and nutritious and available. And to my mind, one of the most important infrastructures is UC Cooperative Extension, because we're the ones helping keep that agricultural productivity and safety and all the other aspects of it going. So I got frustrated and commissioned this report to say, wait a minute, what really is the value of our working landscapes here in California? And the exciting news is, if you look at that, we're the 6th largest sector of the state's economy. We came in ahead of healthcare, construction, real estate, and frankly, if we hadn't been so excessively careful about which NAICS codes we used in this report, I think we would have beat out finance. We're virtually tied with them. This is important because this is a message that you're already starting to see some news media pick up, and that I hope we're going to have a lot more on, because this is a message to our policymakers, both state legislature, local government, economic development, a whole lot of other sectors, that they've got to start paying attention to working lands. And that means they've got to start making some investments in it. So go look at the report. You'll be hearing more about that. Meanwhile, a couple events I just want to make sure folks are aware of. We've got a governing council meeting coming up December 3rd. This is the new governing council we kicked off earlier this year in April. This will be its 3rd meeting. I have to say, it's really exciting. Kim Wilcox, the Chancellor of UC Riverside, is chairing it, and we've got a very diverse array of folks from around the system and some of our external stakeholders on it. And we're really digging into not just what does ANR bring to the UC system, but what can the UC system bring to ANR, and how can we really leverage both on behalf of everybody. I'm particularly excited to make sure our researchers, our specialists, our advisors, and all other folks working out in the field can start accessing more of the UC resources than we typically had. We've also got a meeting coming up December 18th with the President's Advisory Commission. This is kind of an exciting meeting too. We've got several members that have served for a long time that are stepping down. We got some brand new people coming on who are very energetic, and we're going to be doing the meeting quite a bit differently this year, this December 18th. Instead of the big giant U, kind of like the United Nations does, we're going to actually sit these people at rounds. We're going to pre-select who sits with who, because after a series of quick information shares with them, we're actually having a facilitated discussion at each of their tables on how they can start stepping up to the plate way more on advocacy, funds development, and communications. And this is something they asked for. They want to get much more involved on our behalf, and I'm really excited about that, and particularly some of the new people that we've got coming on. Before I hand it over to John, which I'm going to do in a second so I don't overrun my time too bad, just want to emphasize a couple other things. I'm aware there's an awful lot of angst in the system. There's a lot of questions about the budget. I know Wendy, myself, too, the rest of the senior leadership, John, everybody else, the Marks, we're trying to get info out that helps people understand what's going on. But I sometimes feel like the more info we put out, the more confused everybody gets. One of the things we're working closely with Staff Assembly and Academic Assembly, yesterday we had a meeting with the county directors, is really to figure out what exactly is the info people want and need in order to be active on behalf of their budgets. And I don't mean be active as in going to lobby the state legislature, because that's something we're not doing. Our external stakeholders, I'm pleased to say, are speaking up strongly for us. But there's so many other things we can all be doing to tell our story, tell our message, and to be looking for these new partners. We've had great success this last several months with folks reaching out looking at opportunities for shared positions and new sources of funding and joint projects, and it's just really exciting. So I just want to make sure folks know, when we do that, it's not because we're trying to completely and totally change what cooperative extension always has been. Cooperative extension is an amazing, amazing part of the infrastructure that keeps this state and its working landscapes functioning, as are all the programs we deliver with and in addition to it. But the problem is, we've got to really start making sure we're partnering with more and more people, that we truly are serving all 40 million people here in California, all 58 counties. And some of that means we've just got to do business a little bit differently. Also, because I'm deeply concerned, looking at the last 20 or 30 years, federal budgets and state budgets, public funds, are not increasing. Quite the contrary, they're flat at best typically. If we're going to grow this organization, which is my intent, we've got to diversify the portfolio of our funding sources. And that's what you're seeing a lot of effort at. And you're going to be seeing even more. So I think I'm going to stop there. There's some other points. I know a few people had, just a handful of people had glitches with UC Path, but by and large, our cutover on Path was way better than any of the campuses. I think I can fairly say that. So kudos to our UC ANR Path team. It was fantastic. I think I'll stop there, and then there'll probably be some questions that let me go into more specifics. But John, why don't you come on up and give us some info on the recent employee survey?
Thank you, Glenda. I wish I had 1/10 of Glenda's energy for these kind of things. So she's a tough act to follow. So what I wanted to do in the next few minutes is kind of set the context for the staff engagement survey. This is something that's been happening at the University of California for the last 8 to 10 years, where every 2 years there's a survey sent to non-represented staff at the university, including ANR. And I think it's important to be clear about who the audience for this survey is, because it's not everybody. It's people in staff appointments and those who are not represented by unions. For us, that's about 380 people. And our experience at ANR has been very positive with this survey as a good way of getting focus on issues that affect staff and what it means to work at ANR as a staff employee. This year, the survey was done, it's a biannual survey, so we did it in spring of 2019. And our response rate at ANR was the highest among all the UC locations. It was 59%. So the results represent 222 people that completed the survey. And the concept is, it's a survey that's sponsored by the staff assemblies at every UC location, including ANR, as well as by Human Resources at the Office of the President, who funds the process. They work with an outside consultant, Willis Towers Watson, to conduct this survey. There's some consistency in questions from year to year, although there are some changes. And part of what happens is the results get shared simultaneously with the leadership at the location. So Glenda gets a copy of the survey results. And at the same time, the staff assembly leadership gets the results. And the concept is that those, the administration and staff assembly are working together to review the results, discuss them, and discuss what do they mean to us at ANR, what should we take out of this information, and how are we going to create some action plans to try to address areas of interest that are in these surveys. And as I said, I think that we at ANR use it very well. If we go to the next slide. 2 years ago when we did the same process, we identified between staff assembly, HR, and leadership, performance management and wellness as 2 categories within the survey that we wanted to focus on based on the results of that 2017 survey. If you look at our results in 2019, it's striking that those are 2 areas that improved in the last 2 years. And so that's some support for the process works. It has some value that if we put our minds to something and try to focus on making an improvement, then we can make a difference. I think wellness is the best example, where staff assembly 2 years ago said, hey, our marks here are low. We don't have the same kind of support people on campuses have for wellness. And a group of, volunteers as part of staff assembly have made a concerted effort over the last 2 years to promote UC walks, to promote healthy meetings. A lot of other things that you're seeing And the results say now we feel much better about wellness. There's still room for improvement, but again, it's kind of an example of the process works. This year, and I'm going to give you a kind of a quick view in the next couple slides of what the results look like. But since we received them, there's been conversations. I've shared them with our leadership, with the VP Council. We've taken time on those agendas to review the results in some detail and kind of discuss what they mean to us. Staff Assembly has been doing a parallel process. That's what Nikolai is going to come up in a couple of minutes to talk about how they're taking these results. And based on the analysis or the preliminary reaction to them, we've identified career development and leadership as two areas where opportunities to improve those two subjects at ANR. And what we want to do in the coming weeks is come up with some specific action plans around those topic areas to try to move the needle on those issues. So if we go to the next slide, it'll give you some sense about what this looks like. And I know for those in the room and even out there on your computers, this may not be easy to read. Actually, I did want to offer, because our time is so limited, when I've done this before, it's about an hour discussion that includes how to read this consultant's report, because it's not totally intuitive. But at a very high level, well, actually, I did want to offer, if people are interested in that 1 hour deep dive, I am happy to do that as a Zoom meeting. If you send me an email, if I get a handful of responses or more, I will schedule that session so we can have a deeper conversation, because I know we're giving a short script today. The report that I'm showing you right here, this is excerpted from a longer report that's now been posted on our Staff Assembly website, and Nikolai's going to show you where that is. But essentially, this survey, the questions that people are asked are sorted into these 12 categories. And these are categories like communication and leadership, diversity and inclusion. And the results on this page are showing kind of the percentage of positive responses to the questions in each of these categories. And then the right side of the page is comparing our results to, in 2019, to how our population responded to the same kind of questions 2 years ago. And it compares us to the whole university, and it compares us to the national, the people that use this same report with a consultant. And none of it really gives you a black and white answer to say this is important. The way I look at it is this is a way of starting the conversation. And part of what this is showing is career development and leadership are relatively low marks among these 12 categories. Performance management, supervision, wellness are relatively high marks if we look at our results compared to other campuses and 2 years ago. If I go to the next slide, what this report will also show you, if you take a look at it, is the specific questions that fit into each category. This slide is showing what are the specific questions where we had particular strengths as an organization, and I'll just read a couple. I believe strongly in the teaching, research, and public service mission of the UC system. That's the top one on this slide. 95% of the people who took this survey were favorable, which was higher than the overall UC answer a little bit by 1 point, and 5% higher than the national norm, so other organizations. And that wouldn't be a surprising result. People who work for ANR are committed to the mission of the university and to ANR, and this really supports that. The third one down there, my supervisor is supportive of my participation in health and wellness related initiatives and programs offered at my campus location. 73% favorable. For us at ANR, that's a 12-point jump from 2 years ago. So when I talked about we moved the needle on wellness, this answer was totally different 2 years ago. It's 61% were positive about this. Now it's up to 73%. And I would certainly agree that we would want that to be at 100%. The second half, the lower half of this, talks about some of the opportunities. I am confident I can achieve my personal career objectives within the UC system. For us, that answer is 51%. So 51% of the respondents were positive about achieving their career goals. And that was a 11-point drop from 2 years ago. So that's an example of that jumps out of this survey for us to say, well, what happened in the last 2 years that people feel less confident about fulfilling their career goals at ANR, and what should we be doing about that? And so that has been one of the reasons, the responses to that question, why this is bubbled up as, let's focus on that. Let's talk about what does that mean. let's talk about what could we be doing to improve that, because we do want this to be, a place people want to come to work and people want to stay at work. A value of this whole process is this gives us some objective information about how people at ANR feel about working here, and it helps us get past the anecdotes, the loud voices who complain, who can sometimes get ignored. Having this framework kind of forces us as an organization to look in the mirror and say, well, how do people feel about working here and what can we do about it? If you go to the next, actually, I'm going to skip one and go to, yeah, that one's good. So this was wellness. This is just an example of, again, how this report is laid out, this summary report that's available to review in more detail. This is an example where wellness is a category among those 12, and the information is driven by 2 specific questions. If you go to the next slide, career development is another category with those 2 specific questions. I read the one about I can achieve my personal career objectives. The other question is, my campus location provides people with the necessary information and resources to manage their own careers effectively. And for us, 53% were positive on that. And we think there's room to improve that information. Is that the last one I had? So I'm going to turn it over now to Nikolai, who's going to talk about what staff assembly is doing with this information. And it's very much a partnership between HR, because a lot of the goals that staff assembly has around making a positive workplace, that's what HR, that's our mission as well, is we want to make sure it's a place people want to come to work and they want to stay at work. So,
right here, there we go. Cool. Hi, guys. I'm Nikolai. I'm the an SRA at the Sierra Foothill Rec Center. And on my free time, I'm promoting and advocating for staff. Right now, I'm chair for staff assembly. We have Marvin Flores here. He is vice chair. He's from Kearney Rec. And essentially, I'm here with you. Okay? I'm here advocating and supporting your voice, your opinions, your recommendations. So we have a version of how you can participate, be involved, okay? Participate successfully and efficiently. You can do that through staff assembly. So a little bit about who we are. In our activities in the last couple of weeks, we have a council meeting in LA. We had the council members sit around and discuss the issues and solutions from the survey as well as other matters. We had the ambassador meeting that was held in Kearney, and the ambassadors, we had about 23 ambassadors either fly, drive, bus, carpool, however they wanted to get there, because they felt that their voice needed to be heard. So we did an executive summary of the KUSCA results. Now, the KUSCA results are fairly important because it's related directly upon how operations are working and how your workplace environment is either treating you or how you feel that you're being treated. So, the staff assembly supports and advocates for all staff, okay? We offer, who's been to our website? Anyone been to our website? If you haven't, please, we're going to show it here. We're going to show it here after the slide. Please make yourself aware, because there are resources for you, for your development and your career advancement, and other opportunities such as wellness, the ambassador program. Okay, here we go. I'm going to the website here. So the executive, we can go to the 2019 staff engagement survey. So when we met in Kearney, we had 23 ambassadors sit in a room and really discuss openly the issues and solutions that were on the survey, as well as to them personally. And we have 2 links there. We actually have the full survey, parts of what John Fox was able to deliver, and we also have the executive summary. And that executive summary, you click on that. So this is the basic, most improved, wellness, performance management, supervision, and then most declined, the image brand, career development and sustainable engagement. Now, the survey gives you quite different results. When you look really into it, it kind of moves around and weaves around. So, staff assembly pulled together from the ambassador meeting. We're going to meet with senior leadership actually today with the vice chair and myself. We're going to work with Glenda and Wendy. And I've been around the system for a total of since 2000. To my recollection, this has really never been done before, where staff has a big and loud voice that supports everyone here, that actually works with leadership side by side. So we're increasing our exposure with the leadership, with some issues, and we're hopefully going to provide some solutions as well. So what the ambassadors and the council put together as part of what the staff from ANR, we're going to work on career development / advancement, leadership, communication with leadership, and organizational change and innovation. So one of the first most highly populated solution to first approach career advancement for staff was to form a task force for staff advancement. And that's something we're going to actually talk with senior leadership today. And we're in constant contact with John Voss as well. And from there, the task force will take the executive summary and pull all the issues and solutions that were listed from the ambassadors, from the council, and also from the survey. And they will target certain goals and solutions and have a timeline, kind of a budget, kind of a date, and have solutions presented to leadership. We're going to work together on that. If you can go to our main let's go to the ambassadors. Find your ambassador. Please, everyone, if you have a chance, please go on the Staff State website. We have a lot of different resources for you. This is where the ambassador roles are. You can find your ambassador, click on there. And we actually have every ambassador listed that represent each county or rec or UCCE location. And we just had a little changeover today. The new ambassador, kind of unofficially today, for this location will be Vanity Campbell. So David Alamino had served that for 2 years, and Vanity Campbell had stepped up and said she wanted to fulfill that role, and she might want to partner in that action. So if anyone's interested, if anyone's interested here at this location, please get hold of Vanity and communicate with her. I believe that is all I have, and we're going to open it up for some Q&A. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Marvin.
What are some of the resources that you can access to Staff Assembly?
We have a scholarship.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, what are the resources that Staff Assembly provides? So, up to $998 of scholarship funding that coincide with your career path. That's per year. So we have 2 6-month cycles, $499 that you see in our funds for your career development. That's one of our largest programs we like to promote. Ambassador program. We have the wellness committee, the wellness program. As you all know, UC Walks kind of stepped up, got into our world in here, the healthy meetings, guidelines, the recommendations on those, and healthy snack day. It's when you have something cross your desk and it's sort of a well-being kind of a note and hits, it can kind of affect your overall life, not just at work but at home. What you're eating at home. Are you stretching, taking a 10-minute stretch between every 2 hours at your desk? So, any other questions? Oh, Father.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Glenda or John or the survey? Please check out the survey. Please check it out. It happens every 2 years.
I want to add something too.
Sure.
I hope we do get questions via Zoom, but I did want to add something. I know I rushed through my section. That we are, in addition to the staff engagement survey, we are planning to do a broader survey of workplace climate in the spring of 2020. We're going to be using a model that the UC San Diego campus has used for the last 18 years, and other campuses have been adopting. And our intent is that that survey will include academics and staff, including county paid employees that do ANR work. So we want that to be broader, and that it would be similar to what we're doing with this staff engagement survey. It's a tool to try to get a pulse of how people feel about working and to identify issues and priorities. So look, you can look forward to that coming in the future.
I have a question about the deferred maintenance, and I'm curious if this information is available or could be made available, or if there could be more transparency on the level of which things are known to the organization and are slated to be addressed and which aren't. Because I go around to the recs, there's a lot of deferred maintenance, and it's unclear, and it's not clear to me that all the stakeholders know what projects are slated to be fixed and what's in the pipeline.
And please repeat the
Yes.
question. Thank you.
That's an excellent question. The question was a little more information about the deferred maintenance, particularly at the recs. As you've been going around, you're not sure a lot of external stakeholders in particular really know what some of the needs are. Is that?
Transparency for the organization.
And everybody, okay.
People working at the recs.
Okay. So for the last couple of years, we have been working with the rec directors to get an inventory of the needs. And that's where that $45 million came from. And by the way, that $45 million, I want to emphasize, in my mind, that's just status quo. That's keeping the roof from leaking. It is not the numbers that will give us the kind of state-of-the-art research facilities that I believe we need. And that is something we're working on. So there's two things going on. First of all, let's make sure the roof doesn't leak. And that's going to be 40-ish, $45 million. Those lists are available. I don't know if each rec director is sharing it with the staff at the rec, but I know we've got that list, and I think it's on collaborative tools. So we could probably make some version of that available. And frankly, that's actually a good point, because our funds development team certainly knows what that list is, because they're working with the rec directors to help identify what might be potential bite-sized chunks a donor might be interested in. And right now we've got down at Lynn Cove, in fact, we've kicked off a big campaign there with some external stakeholders to take on a new auditorium and some new buildings. And I know up at Intermountain, Rob has done a really fantastic job working with his stakeholders to look at what kind of opportunities are there. So that's one thing, the deferred maintenance. And I'll work with Wendy to make sure we can get some sort of list out. I will say it's a moving target. It changes frequently.
I'm thinking specifically of the H&S, because a lot of the safety issues are related to deferred maintenance. So if we all are on the same page, we can use our resources more effectively.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay. So that point was that if we really knew where the safety and risk issues were, we could do a better job of finding synergies among other programs and perhaps even other funding sources. So we'll definitely make sure that gets to the right people. But let me just also close out by saying Wendy Powers has been leading a blue ribbon task force looking at our recs this last few months. She identified some real leading thinkers from around the nation, brought them in a couple times to look at our facilities. They've had some meetings, they've had several phone calls. I believe we're going to be getting their thoughts soon, because I'm truly interested in looking at what moving forward is the capital campaign we're going to need to embark upon to truly have the kind of research facilities that help us solve not just today's problems, but tomorrow's challenges. And that, Tran has a heart attack every single time I say this, but the reality is that is going to be at a minimum $200, $300, $400 million. At a minimum. For those of you who've had any interaction with research facilities, laboratories, even greenhouses, they're expensive. They're not cheap. So we are looking into that, and I'm kind of excited, and we've got partners who are stepping up and wanting to look at that too. So I've got two other questions so far. One was, is the, I think, $7 billion surplus, was that the right number, Pam? Is the $7 billion surplus at the state right now going to help with our budget? And I guess my answer is, God, I hope so. Right now, there's a lot of discussion going on in Sacramento between those who want to spend, and those who want to make sure we have a rainy day fund. And it's a constant little struggle. But the good news is, I think, from what I'm seeing in meetings with external stakeholders in particular, as well as in just the last few months, I got to say, Ann McMorrow has done a fantastic job working with our state government relations and other internal folks here at UC to really get them to understand more of what our needs are and what we bring to the system. And it's different than a campus. I'm hearing a lot of movement, and we're seeing letters that folks are sending in to legislators, to the governor, to the regents, to the president. They're all getting letters on our behalf right now. And some of you may have seen some of those. I've just started seeing them in the last month or so. So with that kind of voice from our stakeholders, our clientele, speaking up, I would certainly hope it's going to have a very positive effect. That's something we're looking at, and we're working with the rest of the UC system on. I've got a question about the academic survey results available. Yeah, as Nikolai just shared with you, the full survey is on the
Academic though? Is he talking about
academic survey.
John Fox's proposed survey?
Okay, so we don't have an academic survey completed. The one that was just completed that you heard about from John and Nikolai was just staff. And by the way, just non-represented staff. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of the folks that were participating in that particular survey are a lot of our community educators and maybe a handful of other segments, but the vast majority are community educators. And I'm really, and for those of you that are community educators out there in Zoom land, wherever you are, we had a real good conversation yesterday at the county directors meeting about some new ways to look at how our staffing and structures are. And one of the big conversations in particular was about how to better serve our whole system, and with it, achieve two goals. One is that our advisors in the field are able to do the research and academic work they need to do, not the work of community educators, but at the same time, figure out a way to make sure those community educators have a path to, higher level career, to a path to go up, a career ladder. So we're looking at some new structures. It's very early stage, but I'm pretty excited about it. Nikolai and I will talk about it later. I've made a commitment to him at the last meeting we had, and we're going to continue it, that I really hope in this next year to see us seriously up the game about community educators. I think they're one of our key backbone out in the field. I think they're often misunderstood exactly what they do, what value they bring to the system, and we really need to get not just our own people, but like our county government leadership, our partners and others to understand that very important role. And I think, the effort we've seen from CDFA this last year, they wanted community educators and they want more of them. And I think that's what DPR wants. And frankly, we're seeing more and more people recognize the importance of that particular role. So I think that'll help a lot. The survey that's coming up this spring will be a survey of everybody. So, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I just wanted a couple more items about that. So our intent is to include everybody, staff and academics. And my vision is that it will be similar to the way the staff engagement work, is that like staff assembly has been involved in directly receiving the results of the survey and helping to develop action plans and recommendations. For this next survey, I want to continue that relationship with Staff Assembly and also have that same relationship with our Academic Assembly Council. And I've started to meet with them and talk to them about how we're going to prepare that survey. For the most part, it will be following UC San Diego's format, but we will also have the opportunity to add ANR specific questions, and we will be making decisions as we go into it about how their results come back and how they're organized. And that's what I want to partner with Staff Assembly and the Academic Assembly Council about how we're doing it in advance and start talking now about what will we do when the results come back. Because that's really the use of it. If it's just seen as a survey that people take it and it gets ignored, then we will have declining participation and it will be a big waste of time and money. But if we think about how will we get the results, who will own those results, who will have access to them? That was the first question the Academic Assembly Council asked was, will they have access to the raw data? Because they don't just want a filtered consultant's report about the survey. And our response from San Diego was, yes, you can have it. So that's our plan, is it will be accessible. And the concept of that San Diego model is we repeat the same survey each year, and we are very transparent about publishing those results. So again, it kind of forces the organization to shine a mirror on itself and say, hey, this is how we're doing, and we're going to keep measuring ourselves year after year, and hopefully that will drive improvement.
I assume by raw data that doesn't include.
And it would not include identifying information because, yeah, anonymity is a very important principle, and that's also part of the model we'll use.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure about that. We got a question about how long will the match funds from the UC president be available for endowments? And I don't have a solid answer for that. The good news is that we did get allocated 5 matches in the first place because, frankly, before President Napolitano, UC ANR often got left out of such initiatives. She came in, and when she allocated 5 each to each campus, she allocated 5 to us. And frankly, I have to say kudos to our system, and that includes some advisors and specialists and others in the field who worked with their external stakeholders. We actually filled our 5 allocated slots before some campuses did, which is pretty amazing if you think about it, since we're kind of new at that game. But the one that I couldn't fully give you details on that we're going to announce sometime in the next few weeks or month is a 6th one that we were able to make the case that it was eligible for system-wide matching funds the president had. Now, she still got a little bit of money in that pot. If we were able to come up with an appropriate 7th one that really fit the criteria as being system-wide and a very, broad program, possibly we could go after, as long as there's funds in the pot. And if the campuses don't speed up their game, yeah, maybe we can. But I think most of you know President Napolitano has announced her retirement. She'll be leaving next August. I'm kind of dubious that she's going to be adding new money to that when she's so close to retirement herself, because it was something she established. But there's a strong possibility that a new president coming in may choose to do something similar. So if that happens, then there may be some more opportunities, but that's a good year away before we'll know that. Follow up?
Could endowments be written to support a research and education fund? For example, an endowment that could provide range and small ruminant competitive funds for UC ANR research and education programs?
Not being an expert in endowments, I don't know that I can say absolutely yes, but I think I can say very likely. Yes, okay.
Written however a donor wants to specify, but maybe not related to the funds you're talking about from the president.
Okay, so yeah, we've got a couple different types of endowments. Let's make that very clear too. So the endowments we're doing for the presidential match have some criteria to make that match. But doing an endowment for just about anything is fairly wide open. And we actually have a lot of flexibility in working with the donor to actually design how that endowment is going to unfold, what it's going to be used for, and how it's used. You know, for example, the ones we did with the match are actually being administered differently. Some of them are competed every single 5 years per criteria, but one of them is actually tied to a specific position. The Orange County Farm Bureau came up with $500,000, which we were able to get matched, to have an urban ag and outreach support. And that support is tied to whomever happens to be the director of the South Coast Rec. So you can tie funding to a specific position, to a specific program, or in the case of the others, for example, the Rice Commission, the Pistachio, et cetera, they created an endowment simply to provide research support. So what happens is that $1 million each year throws out about $40-ish thousand, and whoever holds that particular chair gets that $40,000 each year to use for research. And the nice thing about that kind of money, for those of you who do research, as you know, it's kind of relatively free of strings. I mean, as long as you're doing research the way the donor said, and in this case, the donors were very, very broad, mostly just, you know, make sure we get to keep growing nut trees in this state. That's kind of the parameters, if I recall. One of them is focused on germplasm and varieties that are varieties of tree, and one of them is on soil-water interactions. I mean, these are pretty open-ended research topics, and you could do a lot there. But one of the reasons we competed every 5 years is that we want to make sure our best and brightest are getting a hold of that. That it's not the kind of endowment that somebody gets and then has for decades until they retire.
Does anyone have a question? Sorry.
Focus on the recs is great. There are a lot of advisors out here that are not in proximity served by a rec. We certainly benefit from assistance in improving our infrastructure and available resources to have more modern program amenities available. I understand that UCCE county offices are provided by the county government and MOUs. The capital campaigns and discussions with any external partners, including county governments, that can help with infrastructure improvement in all our facilities need to be focused on serving all of us, not just rec users. Does administration have plans to address this?
You were asked to repeat the question.
Okay, I think I can summarize that. So, the question was regarding county offices as facilities versus the recs. So not everybody is utilizing the recs as a place they do work. Many of you folks out in the field are at a county office, and there's quite a variation in them as to, you know, quality of the facility, what kind of research equipment or infrastructure you might have there. And the question was, are we going to be paying some attention on how to enhance those county facilities? Which is complicated because they are typically provided by the county government. So it's a partnership that we have to go in and negotiate and work on. And or one of the other things we're looking at in various counties is how to access other facilities as well. I can give you one example that we're discussing down in the Monterey area. There's a community college there that has a couple hundred acres that they'd like to see research being done on. They don't have researchers. We have researchers. They've also got some money for buildings and equipment, which frankly, we don't have a lot of extra money for that at the moment. So we're actually having a conversation about how might we create a joint UC community college research center there. We've got some other community colleges around the state that we already have some close relationships with. They very much want to talk to us. Fairgrounds, private sector. We're actually having a conversation in one county about our offices being in a private building rather than a county building, and I think they are in a couple other counties as well. So we're looking at a lot of these options one by one, but in the larger sense, myself and a lot of the county directors are really stepping up our engagement with the associations of the county supervisors and the county administrative officers so that they too better know what we do and how we do it. and what they're getting for it. And they understand the return on their investment. That's a big project. We've got 2 or 3 different pieces going on right now. I think in the coming years, we'll be able to really up the game in some of those county offices. And but it'll probably not be a one-size-fits-all. It'll probably be a slightly different situation for each and every county, which for all of you here that work in admin, I can see you going, oh my God. But it's already that way when we work with the counties. Every one of our MOUs is just a little bit different. Nikolai, you got something?
Awesome, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions on that, on what she was talking about? Okay. I forgot to mention the task force for staff advancement. If you want to volunteer to be part